Hola, welcome to SpanishForYourJob.com. In this lesson, we will review the top 10 nouns in spoken Spanish. Let's start with the first noun on the list. Please tell me, how do you say thank you in Spanish? I'll wait for a few seconds so you can think about it and say it out loud. How do you say thank you in Spanish? Go ahead, I'll wait. Got it? The word for thank you in Spanish is gracias. Here it is one more time. Gracias. Thank you. Gracias. Were you able to remember the word? Was it easy to remember? Let's move on to the second noun on the list. What's the word for one time in Spanish? Go ahead and say it out loud. What's the word for one time in Spanish? I'll wait for you. Got it? The word for one time in Spanish is una vez. Here it is again. Una vez. One time. Una vez. Next, what's the word for God in Spanish? Go ahead, I'll wait for you. Got it? The word for God in Spanish is Dios. Here it is one more time. Dios. God. Dios. Next on the list, how do you say house in Spanish? Go ahead and say it out loud. How do you say house in Spanish? I'll wait for you. Got it? The word for house in Spanish is la casa. Here it is one more time. La casa. House. La casa. Next, what's the word for favor in Spanish? Go ahead and say it out loud. Did you get it? The word for favor in Spanish is el favor. Here it is again. El favor. Favor. El favor. Next, what's the word for the number 2 in Spanish? Go ahead. Got it? The word for 2 in Spanish is dos. Here it is one more time. Dos. 2. Dos. Next noun. How do you say Mr. in Spanish? Go ahead and say it out loud. I'll wait. How do you say Mr. in Spanish? Got it? The word for Mr. in Spanish is señor. Here it is one more time. el señor. Mr. El señor. Next, what's the word for time in Spanish? Go ahead and say it out loud. What's the word for time in Spanish? Got it? The word for time in Spanish is el tiempo. Here it is one more time. El tiempo. Time. El tiempo. Next on the list, what's the word for truth in Spanish? Go ahead and say it out loud. In Spanish, the word for truth is la verdad. Here it is again. La verdad. Truth. La verdad. The next one. How do you say man in Spanish? Go ahead and say it. I'll wait for you. How do you say man in Spanish? Got it? In Spanish, the word for man is el hombre. Here it is again. El hombre. Man. El hombre. In this lesson, we have reviewed the top 10 nouns in spoken Spanish. How did it go? Were you able to remember all the nouns on the list? Was it easy or difficult? If you were not able to remember all the nouns on the list, or you found that some of them were difficult to remember, I encourage you to go over this lesson again tomorrow and repeat the process as many times as needed until you can memorize these verbs successfully. That's all for today's lesson. Good job!